So today I'm going to talk about the multiple ways I made my clicker masks and the different materials that I used, what the original masks were made out of, and then how I improved with different materials and techniques. Feel free to skip to whatever time I put here down below to go straight to the tutorial, but I consider this a very integral part of the tutorial because you learn a lot about materials and how not to screw up like I did. So first clicker mask that I made was out of oil-based clay. I have a habit of using a material, and if I have a difficulty with the material, I'll say, oh, this material sucks, and then I'll move to something else. And it's only later that I go back and I use that material again that I realize, oh, I was just making some sort of trivial mistake, or big mistakes or small mistakes. Either way, I was just not using the material properly. Me too, using oil-based clay for this mask, even though oil-based clay really wasn't an appropriate choice, at the very least in combination with plaster, the plaster negative mold, because the sculpt, it only took me 2 days to complete, and I even made some fake teeth. When I tried to pull all this oil-based clay out of the plaster, it just 5 days of work just to get all of this clay out of the plaster mold. And I used turpentine, I used solvents. Man, it was just smelly, messy, toxic, just undercuts galore, miserable. It was just miserable. So once I finally thought I had gotten all the clay out of there, I did my first pull, and that's where we came into, I think, what the second or third problem with this was that latex cures as a reaction to oxygen. With these deep undercuts, the latex wasn't fully curing if it was too thick at the ends of these undercuts. So I had to layer it very, very thinly over a long period of time, and lengthy, tedious process. And the first pull I did, I tore the edges of the clicker mask because they weren't fully cured, and I had to spend even more time just digging these latex chunks out of my mold. So as you can see, the mask turned out great, but it was just a lot of effort and a lot of mistakes, a lot of things that just didn't go well. So I poured the foam in, I think I put a release agent in there, a very, very, very mild one. I probably should have put more in there. But I figured it wouldn't be any problem. Like, it's going to be flexible, I'll be able to pull it out. Unfortunately, I used Flex Foamit X, which is a moderate density, and so it was not as flexible as I thought it would be, and it was impossible. It was just impossible to get it out of there. So I literally had to take a hammer to it and crack the mold open, and the final positive sustained no damage at all, but the mold obviously was ruined. You know, the infuriating part was realizing how much clay was left in there. After 5 days of trying to clean it out, there was still huge chunks of green clay left in this mold, and I'm just thinking, no way am I going to use plaster again. This is ridiculous. So I'm like, either we use a different type of flex foamit with a lower density, higher expansion rate that would be very, very soft and flexible and easy for me to pull out, or I'll just start all over and I'll use a silicone mold. So that's what I ended up doing. First, a water-based clay is used to do the initial sculpt, as you can see here. I just used really, really cheap clay that I found around the house. This is literally clay I bought at a Japanese dollar store for $1.50. So in this time I was thinking to myself, well, I'll use a softer mold, silicone obviously being the ideal, but I can't cast latex into silicone. And then I happen to have some Flexit foam, Smooth On brand, polyurethane flexible rubber, and I figured, bam, perfect. The stickiest thing on the planet, and the only thing on the planet that won't stick to anything. Perfect pair to go together, and then we'll experiment with gloving the final foam piece in latex, so for ease of painting. So from the mold to the sink we have a bucket, clean bucket. You fill that with water. Grab yourself some Ultra Deluxe blue liquid detergent. Pretty much any type of blue detergent will work for this recipe. Pour this right in to a point where, I don't know, you have a decent amount. Viscous, you want it to completely coat. Don't let it be thin. The idea is that the detergent will allow your hands to not stick to the silicone and allow you to knead the silicone until it's a more of an opaque consistency. Then you apply it to your mold. So just a note, these type of molds are usually made in a box mold, and the whole piece is sealed usually with a plank with an escape hole for any excess foam. That way there's very little surface area that you have to trim any excess foam that comes out the top. Here we have a high risk factor of if we pour too much foam in, we have a lot of excess and a lot of surface area to cut down, and this is bad, especially since this is supposed to be form-fitting to the cast. So in this case, I'm going to be brushing this foam in and doing it in layers until I get where I want, especially in these areas here where it's a very, very thin application anyway. So that's my experiment, and I'm crossing my fingers. But what I'm going to do is what's common in the industry, where they put a pigmented powder down first and then pour the liquid foam in there, and that way when it's tacky, when it's curing, it adheres to the pigment.